Hello, everyone. Welcome inside the Faith Loop. Glad you're back with us on this Tuesday, February 7th, in the year of our Lord, 2023. It is day 2,111,203 of the Crisis of Identity. And we're in chapter 184. We've been doing this a little bit, I guess, now, Dad.
Yep, a little while.
My goodness. When did that happen?
I don't know. I'm tired, though. I know that.
Oh, mercy. We're talking we're in part 3 of knowledge of good and evil, and the reason why I did this, and honestly, I was just saying this to Dad just before we started here, and I every day I hear from, especially the Christian right, how this is a war of good and evil, and you don't hear it so much on the progressive side. Of course, they don't believe in God anyway.
No,
they don't. I don't know what they believe in, but I do. I know what they believe in, and they believe in it. They have faith. These people are not. For instance, I'm going to use this, and I've been very cautious over the last little bit, and I really work to say what I mean and mean what I say. We constantly hear the word insanity thrown around. We hear people say, "Oh, they're just insane," and I've done it. Guilty. They're not. And I know people go, "Well, they're just insane." You know, Hitler, he was insane. No, Hitler was not. He was completely convinced of what he believed.
That's it.
He wrote his book, Mein Kampf. Nobody knows what the word Kampf means because we don't speak German unless you're paying attention. But it means struggle.
Yep.
He wrote about his struggle. It was My Struggle. That was the name of the book, My Struggle.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
This man took the world, well, I'm not going to get into all that, but we're going to come back to this. These people are not insane. Are there people with less intelligence than others?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Are there people that are willing to be used as tools and say whatever? And yes. But don't think they aren't convinced of something. And there are people that are very passionate on the other side of things, on each side of this war of good and evil that we see in the world. But remember, the reason I talk about these things as I do is I'm not in this war. Because when you talk about this war of good and evil, well, Brian, God's good. And the other side, yes, I get that. But that's not the point of what's happening here. In the construct of what we see within the garden, there were 2 counsels, trees. One was the tree of life. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what you see in the world is just a construct, no matter what. When you start hearing them saying it's a war of good and evil, you're talking about they're eating from that tree. And mankind has been eating from that tree for thousands of years. This is my point. This is a war of life and death. Because what came with the knowledge of good and evil? Death.
Yep, it did.
So when we're talking about these things, folks, when we're dealing with the knowledge of good and evil, yeah, there is good. God is good. He is the only. Jesus said it. But that's because function and dysfunction had already been defined. The reality in which we were created, all of these things are set in place. Man is working to redefine good and evil. And that's what the knowledge of good and evil is about. And this is the war you see when you hear people start, no, they're good, we're the good guys, they're the evil ones. No, they're the evil ones, we're the good guys. Whatever the case may be, That's what you're dealing with. And that's what we're talking about here. And we're in part 3 and talking about gender and identity. Now, we're gonna take a little roundabout view of these things, because mankind has been in an identity crisis since and when he decided to determine his own existence. And that's the point of this. And this is why we talk in this fashion. The gender question in this generation, in this current generation, I believe, Dad, is not different than any other identity question in the generations before us.
No, it really isn't. If you read history, just go look at history. Go back and see where in almost every culture you had these things. They weren't as prominent, maybe.
Well, we don't know.
No, we don't know, and they weren't controversial in one sense of the word. It depended on the culture you were in. Really.
Right.
Because the American Indians, it wasn't controversial to them. They had effeminate men, and it wasn't controversial.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, they had names for them.
Okay.
And it wasn't a controversy at all. So depending on the culture, you know, how they looked at things. No, but it's been going on since Sodom.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
And I would even say before the flood.
Oh yeah.
I think there's been these types of things because it's about defining our own existence and defining existence and identity and identifying with something. And how does the secular world relate to existence within the universe? And this is the question that has been posited throughout history in this respect. The thing that's interesting, Dad, and I want to deal with this today because you think, well, what is creation? What does the ancient world have to do with the gender question, the identity question we're in today? Because we're a culmination of things, I really believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking last Wednesday in the Bible study. Was last Wednesday? Yes, it was. Mm-hmm. It was last Wednesday. And Justin, in the discussion, because we're talking about many of these things, and we were going through some history in that respect. If you get a chance to go back, we're looking at the gospel and the good news and what it really is in the study. And we were going through some things, and Justin brought up transhumanism in the discussion, and he had a really interesting take, because we see in the scripture that life is in the blood. We know that it is scientifically. I mean, honestly, you can say it, the DNA, the building blocks, everything that is, it's in the blood.
Absolutely.
Without blood in your body, it's a goner.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Can't let that stuff leak out.
Oh no.
It's not good.
No. No.
And he was and he made mention, and he brought that life is in the blood, and he said, with transhumanism, what they're doing, they're talking about the consciousness. And I heard, I was listening to a gentleman yesterday that I listened to, and he was talking about these things in the transfer of what they're working, what defines consciousness, because this is the question of transcendence. How does can you remove the consciousness from the mind, from the body, and place it in something else? And this is the whole point of this with transhumanism. And he said they're looking to take and rid themselves of this, the blood, the life is in the blood, and place life in something that we've created and identify ourselves in a new way.
Yep.
And I thought it was tremendous thought, and I hadn't even considered it that way.
Well, no, and I heard a radio speaker the other day, one of those radio shows. He was talking about it and talking about AI, and it's not only that they want to try to become something like that. Mm-hmm. But what they're doing in the technical world, and they want to replace people, period.
Absolutely, Dad.
And he said that way they'll have all the money. But then later, I thought at first, but later he did say it to his credit. He said, well, where's anybody going to spend any money? Who's the people going to buy this stuff? Because there's no job.
Right.
So, what are we talking about?
There is a sinister thought process in this. I don't care, because all of this leads to is destruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's also this thought process, see, when you go back, we talk about history, okay? This is directly after the flood, Nimrod. Go read the small account. We only have a small part of this within the actual Genesis narrative. Mm-hmm. But the Lord looks down, and Nimrod had raised up and brought men to a city, and they're building this tower. And we're going to build a tower so high that we cannot be destroyed. We're going to redefine existence. The Lord comes down and says, we have to confound the language, lest they accomplish what they've imagined to do. So this is the same thought process here. Yep. These people are working to accomplish these things.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, the Lord is not going to allow it. At some point, I think this is where we're coming to the culmination of all things. But it's not different than Babel. It's not different than Babel with Nebuchadnezzar. Look what my hands have made. Accomplishment and whatnot. I mean, it's pretty drastic when you take a man's mind and send him out and eat grass like an animal.
Yeah,
it's pretty drastic.
That's pretty tough on him.
So we see these things in history, guys, as far as on the biblical side. But the secular world with no creator, right?
Yep.
What defines us as beings? And I was looking in this one particular article, and of course we have the blog up with a couple of references to what I'm using today. And this is one that struck me. I read through some things, and this one in particular, and I don't know why I picked it. It struck me. It's from Philosophy Now, a magazine of ideas, and it's an article on existence. Barbara Smoker probes why there is something rather than nothing. Now that's deep. I mean, and this is what I mean. You look at this and you're like, well, yeah, there's something, but if there's something, this is the question. If there is something, then the opposite is nothing. So why is there nothing if there's something? And this is what we sit around and think about. Rather than just accepting the fact that we were created, why can't we do that? Why? That's what's amazing to me. Why? Why can't you just believe that you were a created being?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. To show you the folly of man, and that's what we're talking about right now, like that, Here's Nimrod. Brian was mentioning a minute ago. Here's Nimrod. He builds him a tower. He's going to build this city, and he built him a tower. He should have been building boats. Noah didn't escape in a tower. And Nimrod knew that. And yet he was foolish enough to think that I can build a structure high enough. Well,
yeah, what did that even mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other part of this, Dad. You didn't know, you had no idea of the covenant. You were expressing your displeasure by saying, we're going to build, he will not be able to destroy us again.
Right.
So, wait a minute. So there's a belief that this happened and that there is a being that caused this.
Oh, he knew. Absolutely, he knew. He wasn't doing that because he didn't know. Because it was some myth. No, he knew.
Well, it's just a creation myth.
Yeah.
It's just a myth. This person also deals, this Barbara Smoker also deals with the theological side. She calls it the Christian theologians, especially in my experience, the Dominicans, although it was a secular mathematician, Leibniz, who first framed it 3 centuries ago. If you reply, why not? The theologian will insist that if something is not self-explanatory, that is, if it exists but does not have to exist, it is natural to ask why it exists. You know what's funny to me is they ask that question, if it doesn't have to exist. How do you know what doesn't have to exist? You ain't never been off this planet and you barely lived 70 years. And you all posit that we've been around 500 billion years. So what do you really know? You know absolutely nothing. That's what you know. Well, if it doesn't have to exist.
Well, I could say that about germs and bacteria. Why do they exist? They don't have to exist.
That's what I mean. And this is what we talk about. This is what I'm saying when I'm talking about redefining existence. They pose these questions to say we can figure out how we can exist and because if you go back and look in this thought process, you can, regardless of what you may think is this way or that way or elsewhere, it is still about the survival of the fittest. And if you don't think they don't believe that, look at the world around you.
Yep. True.
That's exactly what they believe. They're not insane. They believe it. That doesn't mean they're not wrong, but they believe it. They're convinced. Dad has talked about this forever. Faith comes by hearing. Well, yes, the opposite of that is true, but faith comes by hearing. And we only think of faith in one way, but that's not the case because the word pistis is just the Greek word to be convinced or persuaded of.
Right.
What are you persuaded of? And these people are fully persuaded.
Which is their faith. It's what they believe.
Exactly. Faith is not a Christian term.
No. No, not at all. It's funny how we use words and we don't understand the full meaning of the word because we just, as Brian said, we categorize it because it's used mainly in maybe one section of society. Mm-hmm. But what he said is true. It just means to be convinced. What are you convinced of? Faith comes by hearing. Being convinced of something comes by hearing.
Yes.
What have you heard, and what are you convinced of?
We have a whole generation that's convinced of this, of identity and the crisis of it. That I believe it's a crisis. That all we see. You heard it today on the way in, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Hitler a minute ago. Most of the German people, there were some that didn't, to be sure, but most of the German people believed him.
Yes.
They were convinced that the Third Reich was a good idea and he would be able to establish it.
Look at Austria.
Yeah, they believed it.
They welcomed him in.
Yes, they did. With flags and cheering and everything else.
Yeah.
He didn't fight them. It wasn't an invasion. So here we are trying to, figure things out, and yet we don't understand faith. Be careful what you're convinced of. Be careful what you hear.
This article is there. If you want to go read it, if you think, I think it's interesting. She says this is the old cosmological argument. One of the 5 arguments for existence of God advanced by Thomas Aquinas. Well, I don't agree with Thomas Aquinas for one, because Thomas Aquinas, all of his work is based on Aristotle, and Aristotle is, last time I looked, wasn't a believer in Jesus Christ. In fact, he lived long before Jesus, and I don't think he posited anything. Well, Thomas Aquinas, he's this great theologian. No. He said he had no problem. He felt that the Catholic doctrines had no conflict with Aristotelian thinking. That's probably true, because I don't believe in Catholic doctrine either. And that isn't a matter of, see, and when you say these things, people get all offended and whatnot. If you've been going and you believe that Jesus is the reality of life, and you've been in Catholicism, in any tradition, whether it be Protestant, whether it be Roman Catholic or American Catholic or Orthodox, of all the different denominations of Orthodox and all the different denominations of Protestantism, get out of it. Go look for the truth. Be born again.
Well, a great example of that, son, is this. I've known many people this way, and I'm sure you have. They say, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Lutheran, I'm a Presbyterian, I'm a Methodist, I'm a Baptist. Ask them what they believe. All they've been told all their life is, you're a Catholic.
Yeah.
And they believe that. They believe they're a Catholic. Ask them what the doctrine of the church is. Mm-hmm. They can't tell you. I've had many of them just sit there and look at me and say, well, we go to Mass and we take communion, and
they go to the catechisms all throughout so they can take communion, because they believe that is what that's the Holy Eucharist, the communion with. You don't eat to commune with God. You can eat while talking.
Sure.
But it's still communing. It's still having that communication. And if you believe in the doctrines of transubstantiation, I just disagree. Because, and this is the other thing, most people don't know what these things are. This is what's tragic. Ulrich Zwingli and Martin Luther so vehemently opposed one another at Marburg, the colloquy there, that they almost came to blows. They had to be separated over the fact of, one said that the presence was in the bread, the other was on the bread. And I think to myself, are we serious? That this is what we've come to blows over this thing? And people will talk about that this wafer that you get actually turns into the flesh of Jesus. No. I'm sorry. I don't see that biblically. I don't see this anywhere. I'm tired of mystery. And I'm not going to back away from this. I've met people who, within the Catholic traditions, that I believe really love the Lord.
Oh, yeah.
But you're in this mess. Come out of it. Get out of it. That, be accountable to the truth, not to a mystery, not to some mystical art. That's nonsense. And this is the problem. But see, how do we define existence? We don't know. Oh my gosh, you can know. And here we have these things. If you go back and look, this is just in the Encyclopedia Britannica, folks. When you talk about creation, right? The flood myths. See, what most people don't realize is these are all tied to creation in these things. Of course, we know the biblical account. Mesopotamian flood myths. You have Eridu Genesis, is what an ancient Sumerian religious epic, or I would say traditional epic. Deities fashioned humankind from clay to cultivate the ground, care for flocks, and perpetuate the worship of the gods. Now, Sounds a bit like Genesis, right? And here's the other thing, and when we're talking about identity, gender, all these things, when we're talking about creation, there's many people, there's scientists, and this is why a lot of secularism has really taken hold, is because they will tell you that the Genesis narrative was written after these Mesopotamian, Hindu, Babylonian texts, and that the Genesis narrative was derived from these, because you look at this.
Yeah.
Well, okay. But I would beg to differ that here you finally have Jehovah stepping into this situation and correcting the myths, correcting the problems, correcting the issues, and giving mankind an understanding, because regardless of, it said it fashioned humankind from clay. Fantastic. But where is his identity? It just shows physical. The difference, and I will tell you this, and I've said it, the difference between the Genesis narrative and all the others is the fact that it gives us an identity, that it shows us what we were created to be in the image and likeness of Jehovah, of the Father. Physically, mentally, and in our conduct. Those three things working together to make us whole and complete. None of these, you can go and read it. It's right there. And then there's all kinds of, the Gilgamesh, same way, Babylonian Gilgamesh epic. Gilgamesh epic, Utnapishtim, I guess, and his wife are the survivors of the mythological flood, having preserved human and animal life in the great boat he built. The couple were then deified by the god Enlil as a reward for heeding the divine instruction to build the ark. And then you have another Mesopotamian myth, is the story of Atrahasis. Then you have the Greek flood myth. The son of Prometheus, the creator of humankind, is equivalent to Noah when Zeus, the king of the gods, resolved to destroy all humanity by a flood. Deucalion, there it is. Deucalion constructed an ark in which, according to one version, he and his wife rode out the flood and landed on Mount Parnassus. Here you have. How did these all sound the same? That's what's interesting to me. Yeah, right? A giant canoe. I'm not going to get into all of them. Go read it. It's right there. These are the things I do. I would encourage you to go check these things out.
The story of Noah is exactly the same.
The story of Noah.
In
Muslim, yes. Yeah, it's not different. But the one thing that separates the Genesis narrative from all of them is image and likeness. We were defined, and the Lord said, this is what I created you to be and how to conduct yourself. Everything else, mankind is flailing around trying to redefine and define his own existence.
Well, and I believe this. What they do is they say, well, because these tablets are older, that the Israelites just copied it because they're older. I don't think so. I think Jehovah stepped in and corrected it. That's what I think happened. Because these older myths, as they call them, I don't think they're partially myths because they changed it into a lie to satisfy their own deal. They didn't want to serve God either. They didn't want to recognize Jehovah. They didn't want to recognize him, just like Adam did. No, I'm going to go. I'll decide for myself. And so they took a reality that actually happened and made it fit their own deal. Jehovah came and told Moses, no, this is the way it happened. This is the way it happened. This is as it was. So, the Lord's done that several times. Jesus did it continually with the Pharisees, correcting them in their traditions and what they said were true and wasn't. So, how far will man go to perpetuate himself?
And to your point, and that's what we've talked about for a long time, the correction. It's about correcting our existence. What is repentance but a change, but a correction, of course?
Yes.
What is being born again but a correction to our existence now? What are all these things? The word chastisement, we're always thinking, he was chastised for our transgression. The chastisement was upon him. That's what. That word there in the Hebrew means correction. Chastise means to correct. We're always, it's amazing to me how much we want to beat it out of everybody.
Yeah.
Why? What's with all the violence? I mean, can't we just correct it? Can't we correct by sharing information in the right way? But see, this is this problem. Knowledge of good and evil. This is what the world is. The world that you see, and I don't care from government to economics to society, all of this, everything that you see on the planet Earth today is a product of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yes, they are.
Everything.
Everything. Because, as we've said many times before, if you look at the Hebrew there, if you look at the original Hebrew, we say knowledge of good and evil. Okay. But it doesn't say exactly that. It says they decided because the beast had told them, you will be like God and you will be able to decide for yourself what is good and what is evil. I talked about this some time ago when they came to Jesus and said, "Good master." He said, "Why do you call me good?" Wait a minute. If anybody on the earth could have been called good, it was him. Right. But what he recognized and what he knew was that good only comes from one source.
Amen.
You don't get to decide what is good and what is evil. We don't get to decide that. And this was Adam's sin. This is what he fell over. He believed it. He believed it.
I'm going to say this.
It became their faith.
Yeah, I'm going to say it. And I know it's the terminology we normally use, but he didn't sin. He didn't fall. He rebelled, and he did it purposely. He didn't fall. I
understand that.
I know, Dad. I know. I'm just saying. I have to do this. I'm not banging on it. It's just me. I'm so. You've always impressed on me the importance of words, and I think it's very necessary that we understand that. The first couple didn't trip and fall. Oh, I didn't know.
No, they made a decision.
They knew. They made a purposeful decision. Their intent was to rebel against the truth.
And it's evident because Jehovah came every day in the cool of the day and talked with Adam. Well, what were they talking about? Well, how was it this morning? Was
How's the weather?
How's the weather out there? Is it okay? No. The father was instructing his child. He was instructing his son.
And you know that this is the case from the conversation.
Yes.
Did Jehovah really? Did Elohim? That's what he said. Did Elohim really say? Yes, he did say.
Yeah,
is what her answer was. So it wasn't this deception.
No.
What deception? She beguiled. He said he beguiled me. He seduced me. That's what is said there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a seduction. If you look at the word Elohim there, again, that's all strength, all power. He didn't use the tetragrammaton. It wasn't Lord. It wasn't the existence. It was just the power. This is what we believe. We believe we can live by our own strength. And this is when you start talking about gender, when you start talking about identity, you're redefining existence in every way. And that's what's going on. But this is not something new. They were redefining identity in the garden.
Yeah. And the tree of life was the Father coming and talking to him,
Yes.
telling him how to live, what to do. And, you know, this idea of good, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Even in a law, and I know this is maybe a funny example to use, but let's look at just the laws of men. Am I able to go out and decide what's good on my own? It's good to rob a bank. It's good to shoot somebody in the head. It's good to kick somebody around the yard. Is that good?
Boy, they're doing that today, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But see, I don't have I can't say that's good because the laws of this country say that's not good. Now, I know that's an earthly example of something.
But still.
But around the world, if you travel, if you bother to go look or study, you'll see that good is defined very differently in other places in the world than here. Very differently.
Yeah.
What they call good, we call evil. What we call evil, they call good. So who's deciding this? Men.
Yep.
And it wasn't up to us. It's not our right to decide. The Lord told us how to live. He told us what was good.
Yeah.
And He's the only one that can do that. He's the only one who can tell us how to function, which is what the word means.
He gave us this functionality.
Yes.
And we are accountable to it.
Yeah. And we turned it into dysfunction.
Yeah. There's some comments there, Pop.
Oh, couple. Anita, she says if you told something long enough, you'll believe it.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
That's true.
And, you know, if you're not careful, if you don't know any better, you will. And my wife, she says, it's amazing what people argue over. And it's true.
It's true. That's a fact.
Yep.
That's a fact. We again, I know we're in a little different. Maybe I don't know if you're able to comment it as easily on YouTube here. We'd love it though. We love the comments. Appreciate you being with us. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to continue this conversation, and we're going to continue to look at these things throughout history. I think it's very important that we understand the foundation and why we see what we're seeing and how drastic these things have become because of that decision to define ourselves as beings rather than to be accountable to what we've been given in image and likeness. And I think that is the key to it all, folks. That's the key. That's the very foundation of our life. And I always go back to that question, they talk about existence, but to me, Dad, it's why do you breathe? So everybody, thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Hope it is it helps you understand things and go read. I challenge you to go and look at these things and think about it. Come back with questions. We love to have them.
I thought about this to your point. When I was coming into the office this morning, I'm listening to this radio talk show.
Yeah.
And he's talking about a Catholic priest that is going to be in the area, I guess, and he's going to give a lecture. And one of the and he was telling how great a man he is, and he was really bold and gutty. Well, one of the things he said was, and it did take some guts for him to say it because of his position where he is. I understand that. But he said, you cannot be a Democrat and be Catholic. So that's the message. If you're a Democrat, you can't be a Catholic. If you're a Catholic, you can't be a Democrat. That's the message? Is that the message really today? Is that what we're out here trying to convince people of? Dear Lord, I mean, I don't even know the guy, but You know, what are we trying to defend? Who's
I think I
preaching
read
the
that.
gospel?
I think I read that in Luke.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't. Maybe it was in Mark. I don't know.
I don't know.
Luke was the more prolific one, though. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I don't know, man. You know.
Everybody have a great day in the Lord. Always remember to give love
And give life.
and give Jesus.